Landing gear collapses are quite rare, fortunately. When they happen, the result is quite messy most of the time, and the aircraft involved is often destroyed. The reason behind such collapses can be quite different, spanning from metal fatigue to pilot error. Today, we're going to take a look at one such nose gear collapse that happened to a Southwest Boeing 737 in 2013. Welcome to airspace. On July 22, 2013, a Southwest Boeing 737 was on approach to New York's LaGuardia airport after having completed an uneventful flight from Nashville, Tennessee. In the cockpit were a 49-year-old captain, a 44-year-old first officer, as well as a pilot from another company that was traveling on the jump seat. The weather at the destination was not great, not terrible, with overcast skies and shifting winds of moderate strength. The approach on that afternoon was flown by the first officer, while the captain was the monitoring pilot. From the outside, everything seemed very normal, and shortly before 5 p.m., LaGuardia Tower cleared Southwest 345 to land on runway 4. But here, things got worse. The 737's nose landing gear collapsed immediately after the aircraft had touched down, and the Boeing ground to a halt on its engine pods and nose. Sparks flew around the aircraft, and emergency services quickly responded while the crew of the 737 prepared for an evacuation. The emergency lights were deployed, and everyone left the aircraft in a hurry. Let's find out what happened here. First, let's have a look at the pilots, and then we'll have a look at the sequence of events that led to the crash. The 49-year-old commander had a lot of experience, sporting over 12,000 flight hours, of which over 7,000 were flown on the 737. However, she had to undergo additional crew resource management training 3 years before the accident as a result of many complaints against her. These had been made by several first officers. The first officer present on the day of the flight was an inconspicuous individual. On the day of the accident, the flight crew briefed an approach that was to be made at a flap configuration of 40 degrees, which is a normal configuration, but it differs from the standard flap configuration that Southwest usually uses, which is flaps at 30 degrees. Most probably, the higher flap setting was chosen due to the fact that runway 4 is quite short, at just 7,000 feet or 2,130 meters. This flap setting therefore offers a slightly lower approach speed and more drag, which results in a shorter ground roll during landing. The deviation from the standard flap setting offers just minimal challenges, as the pitch attitude of the plane is slightly different than it is with the flaps at 30 degrees. However, this is practiced regularly and should pose no threat to any aircrew. As the flight approached the runway, all seemed normal and the approach seemed stable at 1,000 feet. Descending through 1,000 feet is a crucial point, since most operators specify that an approach must be stabilized by that point, which means that the aircraft must be correctly configured, the gear must be down, the airspeed must be at the correct value, and the plane needs to be on the correct glide slope. From that point on, these parameters must be stable. If they are not, a go-around is in order. Southwest 345's approach seemed stable until, at 500 feet, the captain discovered that she and the first officer had forgotten to set the flaps to the 40-degree position, most likely due to a force of habit. Without confirming with the first officer, she set the flaps to 40 degrees, despite having already passed the magic 1,000 feet altitude marker. The first officer accepted her actions and continued towards the runway. Other than that, the approach remained stable until about 200 feet, when the first officer started deviating above the glide slope, shortly after he had disconnected the autopilot. The captain prompted the first officer to get down, get down, get down. The first officer did so, but rather reluctantly, and finally, the captain took control at just 27 feet, or 9 meters above the runway, in a position where the landing sequence was well underway, but the aircraft was slightly too high. The captain, however, did not apply corrective inputs, save for retarding the throttles. Shortly after that, the pitch attitude of the plane started to become negative, which means that the nose was below an imaginary horizon, pointing downwards. Also, the rate of descent increased to over 900 feet per minute, which is almost 5 times the required amount for landing, and the 737 slammed into runway 4 violently, nose landing gear first. As the nose landing gear is not designed for such stresses, its attachments fractured immediately, and it was pushed up into the avionics bay under the cockpit, destroying several systems in the process. Now nose gearless, the aircraft made contact with the runway with its nose and engine pods. It scraped to a sparking halt on the runway edge. Quickly, the aircraft was evacuated and the runway closed. To give you an idea how jarring the impact was, watch these 2 videos which were filmed by passengers of the flight. Here you can clearly see sparks produced from metal scraping against the runway. Note how bad the impact was. The passenger couldn't even hold on to her phone here. The investigation that followed had no doubt as to what happened here. This was a clear case of pilot error. There would have been many opportunities to save this approach, the first one being the time when the captain discovered that the flap setting was wrong, after the point where a stabilized approach would have been mandatory. Other points for a possible abortion of the approach would have been when the plane deviated above the glide slope, or when the captain noticed that the plane was not settling onto the runway, but floating above the touchdown zone. Instead of forcing it down, the correct action would have just been to go around and try again. Unfortunately, the captain finds herself in good company with her actions. A study published in 2011 suggests that a whopping 97% of unstabilized approaches are continued to a landing worldwide. Apparently, many pilots still consider landing from a bad situation to be the safer option than to just go around and try again, unfortunately. A paradigm shift towards a more go-around minded mindset would improve flight safety greatly. After this accident, the first officer was offered additional training since his approach was not exactly stable. Also, he did not intervene when he should have. He too could have called for go-around on multiple occasions, but didn't. The captain, on the other hand, was fired after the accident. Her prehistory with crew resource management issues and her misjudgment of the situation and mismanagement of her first officer apparently were the last straw, ending her career prematurely. The aircraft involved in this case was severely damaged in multiple locations, most prominently the forward section where the nose gear strut had penetrated into the avionics compartment. The 737 was scrapped since repairs of the 14-year-old plane would not have been economic. And this was the story of Southwest 345. A rather short video this week, but I'm working on something a bit larger for my 10,000 subscriber celebration, which will probably happen sometime next week. I'll have some exciting announcements to make then. If you liked the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. Also, if you want to watch more interesting aviation incidents, check out my playlist. There are many more strange cases you probably haven't heard of. That said, see you all in the next one.